I grew up with 3 younger siblings. We're all pretty close in age, 18 months or so. Between the 4 of us, there were constantly shifting alignments. 2 against 1, twins against non-twins, boy against girls, and we were constantly in battle. We hit each other, we stole each other's clothes, we fought for attention. It was kind of vicious. Now we're all really close, but with that much fighting growing up, there was an equal amount of saying sorry. A lot of times it was my mom making us apologize to each other. Sorry I bit you, sorry I stretched out your shirt, and so on. But when I think about saying sorry, I think back to those years. I certainly got my apology reps in. There's a component of Jewish life I've always been curious about because it basically centers on saying sorry. Every single year, during what we call the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Jews reflect and atone. It's a tradition I don't totally understand and certainly have never participated in. But here I am making this podcast, and it feels like a good time to learn what I never did as a kid. What is atonement? And why do Jews make such a big deal about it when they're learning about their faith? So I asked some kids. I wanted to travel back in time to being a young adult, when I'd be learning how to forgive in a Jewish setting if I'd continued with Jewish education. First, I consulted Ariel, a 13-year-old who lives in DC and observes Yom Kippur every year.
There are certainly times where I feel like I've disrespected some people when I shouldn't have done.
On Yom Kippur, Ariel does a lot of reflection.
And doing these prayers on Yom Kippur really makes me think about this kind of stuff, how I can improve on speaking and how I act around other people.
That's one half of the Yom Kippur recipe, reflection. The other piece is atonement. That's a big, heavy word, one that I'm not sure I had a good sense of when I was a kid. I talked to 12-year-old Charlie about it.
Can I ask you what you asked for forgiveness for?
Probably making my parents mad or being rude to them, and my brother too.
Charlie says that atonement is about accountability to the people you've wronged. And to make sure you're accountable, you have to go beyond just reflection and prayer.
You're not gonna start praying if you mess up. You're gonna start saying sorry.
Turns out that's kind of daunting, but it might make us better people in the end. This is Shofar So Good, a podcast about my search for Jewish answers. Episode 4, All Will Be Forgiven. We say sorry as kids because we have to, and because we don't yet understand how our actions can hurt other people. But as we age, we start to form our own values and ethics. And as I'm learning, that is a pretty important foundation in Jewish practice. I spoke to Rabbi Susan Goldberg in LA about this. She told me that it's our own sense of values that tells us when we've done something wrong.
You can think about it as returning to your values, right? So there may be ways I have acted this week, this year, that are out of alignment with my values.
In other words, in Judaism, the standard you're being judged against is you. This isn't a what would Jesus do type situation if you believe in that type of thing, which, if you're listening, you may not. You're being asked to live up to your own code of conduct.
I treated you not well. I treated myself not well. I didn't treat, a real need in the community in a way that didn't reflect my values in how I spoke and how I acted, or in how I didn't speak or I didn't act.
I started thinking about my own code of conduct. I got the easy ones out of the way. I try to be honest and even-keeled, and I followed the golden rule. After that, I had to think a little bit. I'm a woman of my word, I suppose. I follow through with the things I've promised to do. I try to be generous and offer to help. I try to extend grace. And I try to treat all people with dignity and respect. Even myself, even when I don't believe I deserve that. But really, if I'm honest with myself, that's all the easy day-to-day stuff. The harder stuff often plays out in our closer, older relationships.
More complicated are examples of transgressions you might commit against other human beings that are more complex and unfurl over the course of time.
This is Rabbi Josh Aronson. He's a rabbi at Temple, Judea, not too far from where I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. It's where all my friends had their bar and bat mitzvahs, so I spent quite a bit of time there, which is why I sought Rabbi Josh Aronson out. I kind of wanted to turn back the clock a little bit and see what my friends may have learned that I didn't.
You have broken relationships. It's unclear even to begin to think about how those relationships were broken. Usually it's common for those relationships to deteriorate or break as a result of actions by both parties. But how do you begin to then claw that back?
Rabbi Josh Aronson says that Judaism gives us a formula for addressing these transgressions. This whole period where this really happens is referred to as the high holidays. It starts with Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and then there's Yom Kippur, the holiest day for Jews. This is the day. Someone once called it the Super Bowl for Jews. I've heard the Day of Guilt. You get the idea. Once a year, according to Jewish tradition, we're supposed to take a pause and look inward. We take inventory of these mistakes and we think about how we're going to fix them.
We have to go through a process of atonement, or in Hebrew, the word would be tshuva. That word itself actually means road or path. And when we sin, we stray from the right path. And tshuva, returning, sets us back on that right path.
This is why the high holidays are so important. Observing them means wiping the slate clean. It's not exclusively Jewish to ask for forgiveness or reflect on your behavior. But Judaism does have its own infrastructure. Rabbi Yoshi Zweibeck reminded me you have to earn someone's forgiveness. He's a senior rabbi at Stephen Wise Temple in LA.
There are religious traditions where, you can go directly to the priest, and the priest can sort of be the mediator, and the priest can say, okay, Kate, you did these things wrong. If you do this type of penance, you'll be forgiven. And it's like, well, wait a second. Yeah, that might work when it comes to God's forgiveness. Although I'm not so sure how that works either, because who am I to say that I understand exactly how that would work with God? I can't say that. But I do know from personal experience with other people that I can be worthy of their forgiveness, and they can forgive me if I do the work that is required to be worthy of that forgiveness.
Teshuvah, as I learned, is a process. The steps that one can go through to do the work required to be worthy of forgiveness, as Rabbi Yoshi Zweibeck puts it. He laid out the steps: remorse, regret, restitution, resolve, and then refrain.
And then you can see there's this R pattern, which is nice. It helps to remember.
So let's start from the beginning. Remorse and regret, that's pretty self-explanatory. You have to recognize you did something wrong and acknowledge you wish it didn't happen.
You can immediately recognize that you've done something wrong, express your remorse, express your regret, say, I'm so sorry I did that, and I'd like to make it up to you.
Once we've looked inward and figured out we've done something wrong, we have to go fix it. Only then can you begin to make right. That's the restitution part.
Can we, go and have a cup of coffee and have a nice conversation? I said something publicly. I want to retract my statement and make it clear to everybody that, that was on me.
There's a big emphasis on transparency.
Rabbi Susan again.
I'm going to say out loud what I did. I'm going to take responsibility for it. And if there's something that you can do to repair the damage, like if it's something broken, that you can buy them another or repair it or whatever it is, or if it's an emotional thing that you can offer some suggestions of how you can repair.
Then there's the fourth step, resolve. Rabbi Yoshi Zweibeck again.
Resolve is, I'm not going to do that again. And you know that you've made those steps successfully when you find yourself in a similar situation and you refrain. That's the last R. You refrain from doing it again.
It's kind of a long process.
Yeah, and I think like anything else, the better you get at it, the shorter the process is, right? The first time you go through that, and we've had that with people, where it's like, can't you just say you're sorry? Can't you just acknowledge what you did? So I think it's a long process if you're not very thoughtful and committed to it. I think when you're really committed to it, it can be a very quick process.
Yes, it can be a quick process. But Rabbi Susan told me it may not be over when you're done apologizing. The person you've apologized to isn't required to immediately accept. And Judaism gives us a process for what happens when the person you're seeking forgiveness from doesn't want to give it to you.
It's okay if that person says, I need a little time to think about this. And so the instruction then is you go back again and you go up to 3 times. You approach that person and you say out loud, you don't like mind meld. You have to speak out loud exactly what it is you did. And the other thing is that you can bring 3 witnesses in front of these folks. I'm going to say, I did this. And I know we've talked about once and you weren't ready, but I wonder if now you are and you might be open. And if they say, no, I need another time, then you do it a 3rd time. And then what our tradition says is after the 3rd time, and if they're not willing to release, that is now their work to do.
After that, well, you've done what you're required to do. The thing is, the rabbis say we shouldn't just flex our apology muscles once a year. Those muscles need to be moved daily.
There's a beautiful teaching that one of the rabbis says, we should repent one day before you die. And of course, one of his students says, well, Rabbi, nobody knows when they're going to die. How would I know? And he says, aha, so you repent every day because it could be your last day and you don't want to die with unfinished business.
But this is a lot of forgiving, and it's a lot of asking for forgiveness. I asked Rabbi Josh if, he gets kind of bored with it.
People often ask, why do you study the Torah all the time? It's not changed. And the answer, of course, is nope, the Torah hasn't changed. I have. Judaism has 2 large components. They have ritual requirements. You should light Shabbat candles. You should go hear the shofar sound. You should go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. On the other side is the ethical teachings and how to treat the stranger, how to treat other people, how to treat your neighbor, how to do all of these different things in interpersonal relationships. And I believe that the combination of both of them, the entire purpose of that, is designed to make the world a better place and to make individuals their best selves.
I am, of course, interested in being the best version of myself. And it's comforting to know there's a process that might help me get there. But in practice, this entire process takes an immense amount of courage.
One of my favorite philosophers, named Emmanuel Levinas, had an essay. It was called Judaism, a Religion for Adults. It is a religion that is based on an enormous set of responsibilities that each Jew is obligated to fulfill. That's a heavy tradition to carry. That means that there's a lot of guilt that is incurred because you're constantly falling short of what it is that you're required to do. And if you're aware of that, it means there's a lot of walking around feeling like I haven't done enough.
And as Rabbi Yoshi reminded me, it's not enough to just mean well. I have to act on it.
In Judaism, it's the deed that counts. What I love about that is it's very easy to delude ourselves on the it's a thought that counts side. And we know that we are capable, maybe even kind of built towards self-delusion. So Judaism has always privileged deed over creed.
Like Rabbi Zweibeck said, it's a heavy burden. But the good news is that there's an assumption in Judaism that making mistakes is an inevitable part of simply existing.
So there's also this built-in assumption that we're going to make mistakes. And I really appreciate that. That it is not a perfection practice, and that's not even an aim.
It's about growth, not perfection, which takes some of the heat off of me. I can make incremental changes to be a little bit more patient, a little nicer, etc.
One of the things that tshuva gives me is hope that repair is always possible. And that is also a very uplifting idea.
And the Jewish tradition asks us to think beyond our individual lives and experiences. It asks us to atone collectively by considering how we've been complicit in other people's actions, where our actions haven't exactly lined up with our intentions.
And it is one of the ways that I see tshuva. Tshuva is kind of like a time travel because you're willing to go back, look at what's happened, and then right here in the present, repair for the past.
Is there anything about being the receiver of apology?
Yeah, I'll say there's a lot less in the tradition. I will say that I've also drawn on other experiences. I'm really interested in what leads people to be willing to let go and forgive. And I don't know if you followed at all the process they did in South Africa once there became a free South Africa, and there was the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu of blessed memory. He did a lot of writing on forgiveness. They said forgiveness does not mean condoning what's been done. It means taking what has happened seriously and not minimizing it, but drawing out the sting in the memory that threatens to poison our entire existence. So it's that sense that if we don't release, then that pain becomes a really held part of our lives.
Embedded in all of this is a hope for the future. Imagine if the whole world took this practice seriously. Atonement might offer a path forward. If Shuva is kind of a time travel, seeking forgiveness might open our hearts and give us new ways to relate to each other.
New ways of thinking about how our society and our culture and our country could be organized. I mean, it's pretty profound how the willingness to go back, the willingness to do that really makes the possibility of what can happen in the future very different.
Throughout the series, collectivism has come up again and again. That makes sense. Experts I've talked to have said that our relationships are a big part of Jewish life. We light Shabbat candles together, we pray together, we grieve together. But at the end of the day, I have to deal with myself. Teshuvah gives us the tools we need to make right with others. But what about ourselves? Rabbi Josh Aronson again.
The hardest journey is for people to forgive themselves when it comes to meaningful, difficult, heavy, weighty transgressions.
Rabbi Josh Aronson says that forgiving ourselves is the hard part.
Each trauma is, to some degree or another, a bit of an amputation, and it's learning how to live a new life without that part of you. And you have to find a way toward living a life of meaning in the wake of the fact that you're an imperfect person.
Forgiveness is what Judaism gives us for a way forward. Rabbi Susan again.
There is a Jewish practice of a forgiveness prayer that is said at nighttime. And it's a lovely prayer, and it asks us to be, please let me be forgiven. Let me forgive others who've wronged me, and let me please be forgiven. And it's a beautiful prayer to say at night. And also I think that it helps to work the muscle of release, like asking for that for myself, and also asking that I be a forgiving person towards others. But that takes work. That's back to that action part. Like, it can be a really emotional journey to release something when we feel that we have been wronged.
After talking to these rabbis, and especially the kids, I started to think about the ways I failed to apologize to my younger siblings when we were younger. I figured I'd call them up and ask them about the childhood spats we got into, and whether atoning once a year would have cut down on the constant battles. Believe it or not, this took a ton of courage. I didn't know how they'd feel digging into these memories while being recorded. But when I called my little sister Natalie, she was honest with me in a way I didn't anticipate. All this stuff about biting and hitting, I realized I might be focusing on the wrong thing. The hurt we inflicted on each other was potentially a lot deeper.
I've expressed to you and to the siblings that I felt very ostracized growing up, and I felt isolated. I felt like I was the assigned black sheep of the family. I don't think that was necessarily malicious, and I didn't get a sorry in real time for it, because I don't know that you all necessarily knew what you were doing in real time. I think what's meaningful is that as adults, when we've all worked on our relationships with each other as a unit, but also individually, that all of us have actually been able to say, sorry that I did this when I was younger.
So you're saying that maybe we said sorry a lot for the smaller things and not sorry enough for the bigger things.
Yeah, I think it was like a word that we threw around a lot. You guys have said to me, we're sorry for XYZ.
It's kind of like what Rabbi Susan was saying about transparency. I apologized out loud for one thing, but meant another. And now that we're adults, It's clear I apologized for the wrong thing.
So you feel satisfied with the apology?
Yes. It means much more to me now as an adult because I know that you know what you're really apologizing for.
A few years back, Natalie took a big step in getting sober from alcohol. I always imagined that for her, this was a personal step, and one that impacted her alone. But talking to her, I realize now that the process was like her own secular version of teshuvah. She spent months reaching out to those she'd hurt, apologizing for the things she'd done, and mending the relationships that she'd damaged.
It's much easier to say, well, that person stopped being my friend, than it is to say, gosh, I probably did something, or I maybe did something that made this person uncomfortable, and it made it hard for them to be my friend. And I think it's uncomfortable for people to say sorry. It's uncomfortable for people to feel like they've done something wrong. I think it's easier for me to do it because I know I've done stuff wrong, right?
This experience taught my sister a lot about atonement. And even with her more secular frame, I think I have a lot to learn from her, including how comfortable she is saying sorry. And she holds other people to the same standard. Nowadays, Natalie makes it really clear when I've done something wrong. It's like she has this utter transparency and willingness to apologize, while I'm still learning.
As a kid, you learn like the golden rule of, treat others the way you want to be treated. But that's okay, right? Like that's a nice statement, but it kind of seems like a truism in that it doesn't actually force you to confront what you're doing and the way that you treat other people. I don't think you really get that until you have life experience, until you go through things and can understand a situation that somebody else might find themselves in.
Yeah, so maybe that's why it's harder for kids, because you have such limited understanding.
You don't have a worldview. You don't understand other people. You don't understand how your actions affect people on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can understand that till you confront yourself and your role, and also till you go through hardship and understand how you felt during that time and how you would want someone to feel that was going through a similar experience.
What I learned here is that it's not too late to apologize or revisit the past. It's kind of that beauty of teshuvah, of time travel. I can go back, say sorry, and have hope for the future. Not a hope that I won't ever make a mistake, obviously I will, but that I'll feel a little bit more comfortable being vulnerable and owning up to it when I've done wrong. I finished writing this episode around the time of Yom Kippur, so I did it. I found a synagogue and I went to services for the high holidays. I left feeling really whole, like my journey to Judaism was complete. I'd done something I'd been scared to do for almost 30 years. And then, a few days later, I came across some information in my research that shook my understanding of Judaism. Specifically, who inherits it and who is required to convert.
Who is a Jew and who counts in and who's a part of the community.
And I'm actually not exaggerating. It spun me into a crisis of faith. As it stands right now, am I Jewish?
If I were the rabbi of a congregation and you came to me and asked me that question, I would tell you that your desire to identify as a Jew brings you almost over half the way there.
That's on the season finale of Shofar So Good. Shofar So Good is written and produced by me, Kate Mishkin. It was edited by Lacey Roberts. Engineering and sound design by Jesse Perlstein. Music composed and performed by my mom, Nan Schwartz. Our production assistant is Jack McDonald. Artwork by my sister, Laura Mishkin. The song you're listening to is called Swirls and Eddies. It was written and performed by Grace Corsi as part of her debut album, Downriver. This project was made with support from the Jewish Writers Initiative Digital Storytellers Lab, a project of the Maimonides Fund. Many thanks to Ginny Noakman, Sarah Lefton, and Rebecca Friedman. I'm incredibly grateful to the people who've mentored me, including Reka Murthy and Ian Koss. My parents, Nan Schwartz and Rob Mishkin, have been instrumental in making the show, as have my step-parents, Barbara Mutnick and Conrad Pope. And my biggest cheerleaders/critics are my siblings, Natalie, Laura, and Andrew. If you want to help support the show, do us a favor and tell a friend about it, and then leave a review for the podcast. You can also help with a donation, shofarsogood.com/support. We have one episode left this season, dropping next week. See you then.